Hi everyone, and welcome to another ROX Talks on ROX Network. Tonight I'm talking to Ernie Cefalu. Born in 1945, he's a contemporary artist and senior creative director, working currently out of Los Angeles, California. He's best known for designing the artwork for many a classic and album. Ernie attended the California College of Arts and Crafts, now known as the California College of the Arts, and graduated in 1969 with honours. Soon after, Ernie started his career on Madison Avenue at Carrie Advertising, where his first assignment was to create the campaign and graphics for the International Paper Company's 1970 National Sales Meeting. His solution took the form of an elaborate, award-winning, off-Broadway musical production, Dolls Alive. In the early part of 1970, Cefalu became art director at Norman Levitt Advertising, where he created the Jesus Christ Superstar album and Angels in an agency shootout, with Decca Records account for that prize. Let's hear from Ernie all about his long and illustrious career as a graphic designer and a man with a wonderful eye for colour, shape and style. First of all, Ernie, I just want to thank you for taking the time to do this interview. It's really good of you for taking the time out to talk to me.
Don't be ridiculous. I love talking. Not that I love talking about myself, but I love talking about the stuff that we did as a company. It was pretty amazing. I mean, you guys had Hypnosis, which was a great company with a lot of really incredible artists, and in fact, when Storm Thurgerson and one of the other guys came out in the early 70s, they interviewed to the guy here. We're in their first album cover art book. So, I mean, and they did some really great stuff. I mean, obviously, but they were more photography and we were more illustration. So, and they were mainly British groups and we were mainly American groups. So, but we had a lot in common. And I love meeting Storm Thurgerson. He was amazing.
Funnily enough, we've just done a documentary about Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon at 50, so that's a wonderful tie-in, and two great minds such as yourselves sharing ideas is a bit mind-blowing for somebody like me.
Well, I've come to learn that there are a lot of people that really love the backstories, and I think that's when I say I love doing it, I love talking about it. It's about the backstories, and people ask me all the time, well, what was it like in the 60s? What was it like when you guys were working with this band or that band? And it was just it was great to be able to convey that stuff, because at a certain point I'll be gone. You just need to be told. So people like yourself and Joyce Conroy at Saturday Night Block Party, she's giving me a weekly spot.
Oh,
and that's
brilliant.
Great. Yeah, it's on my Facebook page. It's called the Block Party, and it's a 3-hour show that she does all this great music, all kinds of music, and then she gives a lot of education about it too, which is great. So, and I kind of relate to that because that's kind of what I'm doing here, and what we're talking about, this. If you'd like, you want to start? Should we start?
Yeah. I think a good place to start would be to take you right back to the start of your career as an artist. Do you think your education at the California College of Arts really stood you in good stead for the work that you would have to come?
It's really funny like that because I never realized that I could make a living out of doing art, and I always liked it. But I never realized it as a vocation. It was always just something I loved to do. And when I got out of the Army, I realized that I needed to do something. I went into the reserves in the late 60s, and actually in the early 60s, 64. And, getting out after that and realizing I needed to do something, I needed to figure out a way to make a living. And I always liked art, so I put together a portfolio of high school stuff that I had done and junior high school stuff because I went from being the artist in the class to being, the best artist in the school. And then you go from junior high school to high school and you start all over again
Mm.
because there's more people that are as good as you or better, usually better. And, so you sort of start at the bottom rung and work your way up again, which is what I was able to do in high school. And then after high school, like I said, I got out of the Army and I realized that I needed to make a living. So I put together a bunch of work that I had and I went to California College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland. And it was a great campus. You can see from the picture there that that's Treadwell Hall.
Mm.
And Treadwell Hall was the administrative facility, and it was an estate. And the people donated the estate was a 4-acre estate in 1922. And
Wow.
there were carriage houses and stables and all these amazing old buildings like this one, and that's where our classes were. I would have drawing classes in a barn, that was on this 4 acres in Oakland. And where it was situated was amazing too because I don't know how familiar you are with Oakland, but Oakland has the hills, Montclair, and you can look down the main street all the way to Jack London Square, which is miles down. So there's one street that runs all the way from Montclair, which is like the Beverly Hills, all the way down to Jack
Wow.
London Square, which is where the water was. And so it was a great campus, had great view, and just some really cool people. And I kept changing my major every semester because I was exposed to so many different things.
Mm.
And that's there's a school called Art Center, and they're really priming people to design cars and do advertising. And that was the main two things coming out of there. But where I went to arts and crafts, they had a variety. You could be a jeweler, you could be a sculptor, you
Yeah.
could be all different things, and fine artists. It was mainly a fine artist school, and so I kept changing my major every semester till I got in my junior year and decided I needed to really do something serious. And I entered a contest and see myself there with the mayor of San Pablo,
Mm.
a little city outside of Oakland, and they had run a contest to design a logo for the city. And so there were, I think, over 2,000 people that submitted stuff. And, I won. And I got a $500 check and the logo for the city of San Pablo. But more than anything else, I got a good, swift kick in the face of, hey, I can make this a living.
Yeah.
I could do this, and that's kind of what happened. After I graduated college, or as I was graduating, I realized that if I was freelancing in a couple of agencies in San Francisco and doing odd jobs here and there. There was a Miss Purdy who ran the administrative part of Treadwell Hall there, and people would call in and, oh, I need an ad done, or I need this or that, and she would recommend people. And she was great. She loved me. I loved her. And she would give me all the first chance of getting all. So I was building a portfolio because I knew that if I was going to do anything in this, I was going to go to New York.
Yeah.
Because it was New York, Chicago, and San Francisco was like a way third,
Mm.
because the opportunities were so great in New York and Chicago that, I knew I needed to go there. And I built a portfolio. I stayed an extra year. I taught a watercolor class. And built a portfolio. I worked at Walter Landers, which was on a ferry boat in the harbor in San Francisco, and you'd sit there all day and you'd go like this, back
Wow.
ferry boat, because it was docked there in the pier, and that was a lot of fun working with
Yeah.
them on Dixie cups and plates and stuff like that. So I was doing that kind of work, but it was really not. The opportunities weren't there. There were a few agencies, but it wasn't what I needed to do. So I decided
No.
I would pack up and go to New York. And my dad built a portfolio for me that was about 150 pounds, and I schlepped it around New York, trying to find a job. At this time, Bonnie, who was my girlfriend at the time, we had been going together for 6 years, and we were living together in Oakland, and we decided that I was going to go to New York and bring it to its knees because now I'm the best there is in arts and crafts in advertising, and I'm going to just kick ass. So, and once I go there and I get the job, won't take long. I'll bring the city to its knees. They'll be fighting to get me, and I'll send for her, and she'll come, and we'll live happily ever after. Well, it didn't quite go that way. Didn't quite work out that way. You know, the best laid plans of mice and men.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I ended up going to New York. I didn't know anybody there. I got a place in Brooklyn. And I used to think that if I got on any subway going in any direction, if I stayed on it long enough, it would get me to where I needed to go. And so I ended up in some weird places. But for the first week and a half, almost 2 weeks, I was getting no luck. When I was in college my last year, one of the other things that I did was reach out to agencies in New York to see if I could make an appointment to see them. And so I had a half a dozen things set up. And so I go there and I was green. I was asking for too much money. I didn't know what I was talking about. I had some printed pieces. I had a nice portfolio, but it just wasn't what they were looking for. I ran into a stone brick wall. And I was shocked because I thought for sure I'd be, king of the jungle here, but that didn't work out. So I called Bonnie I had given myself 2 weeks. And that's the worst thing you can do is ever give yourself a time frame. Because it's like at a slot machine. You could put in $100, you could put in $1,000. You walk away, some guy comes up, puts a quarter in, and he wins all of them.
Yeah, and so you can't quit.
No, you can't. You can't quit. And yet I was ready to quit. I called her up and said, look, I've misjudged this whole thing. And I had been talking to her, saying, well, I got this appointment and trying to be up. But the more I was there and the more I was getting rejections, the harder it became to really be upfront with her. And I finally, this call where I had decided I'm going to go back to Oakland. We've got an apartment there still. Both our parents are in San Jose, which is just a half hour away. And this would be good. Bonnie had never really been into a town bigger than Oakland. She grew up in Northern California. Her father was a lumberjack. And she really didn't have exposure to big cities like that. But, she was going to pick up and come to me with, to New York with me. And that was really, and so I told her, I made a big mistake. I'm going to come home. I can freelance. I can find a job. There are agencies there. Eventually I'll get a job. And I totally misjudged New York. And I'm going to book a flight and I'll come back. And she said, okay, if that's what you want to do, but if you come back here, I won't be here. And I said, what do you mean you're not going to be there? We've been together where are you going? It's all good. And she said, no, it's not all good because you're running away.
Yeah.
And I don't want to spend the rest of my life with somebody that's going to run away from the first bit of adversity that comes along. And I couldn't, Carrie Ann, I tell you, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this is a woman that I love more than myself, and she loved me the same way, and yet she's telling me that she's not going to be there if I come back, and I hung up the phone, and I thought, oh man, what am I going to do? I had one more appointment. This was on a Thursday. That was on a Monday. I decided, well, I'm going to just go get this job. I'm going to go get it. I don't care. I'm going to get it. And I sure did. I went, I got the job, and it was for doing, you'll see that on the camera right here, the Dolls Alive poster. And that was the company that I went to work for, Carloni & Associates, was a small agency in Lower Manhattan. And they needed somebody that had a flair for a kind of West Coast feel, which was great because I was from the West Coast. And they wanted something very contemporary. And I was really heavily influenced as a designer by Peter Max. I thought his work was amazing, and it was my generation. It was the 60s. Love and peace, and he was the guy. He was the Rembrandt or the Cezanne of our generation, of our mindset, of our revolution, coming.
Which it was, it was a total revolution.
Yeah, and he wasn't really liked that well by fine artists because he was more advertising. People in graphics are whores. They'll compromise their art for money. where a fine artist won't do that. And that was one of the initial things that I had in college, where mainly it was all fine artists, and I'm this advertising guy, so I'm the one with leprosy, who wants to come around me. But it was okay because I made some really strong friends and relationships. So I did this Dolls Alive. It was a national sales meeting at the Roosevelt Hotel in 1969 for 500 salespeople from international paper companies, their sales force. And it was a national sales meeting where they were introducing all these new paper stocks. And it was like a real motivational thing. And they gave me half a day. First of all, come up with a name for it, come up with a concept behind it, come up with the graphics. And so I came up with this idea because I was a big fan of the Rockettes. Growing up, you watched them on TV every Christmas, and they were amazing. And they were synonymous with New York. Yeah. And it needed to be New York-ish. So I came up with this idea called Dolls Alive. And what it was singers and dancers and people doing skits and music. And we hired Skip Redwine, who was a songwriter, to write 10 songs about paper stock. Like the big hit Ticonderoga Text was a huge hit. So he wrote these songs, and we pushed. Part of the thing that I did was an album. We did I designed a hexagon album cover that on the record label for Dolls Alive, as you see here next to Jesus Christ Superstar, between Superstar and the Rolling Stones stuff, that was the first use of the lips for the Rolling Stones. It was done originally for 1969 for international paper company Dolls Alive, and that was the record label. You can see the spindle hole in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So I did this promotion, and up here in the top right, you'll see the record. There's the album cover, and those are a couple teasers that went out as mailers to get these salespeople all organized to come to this event, this 3-day event in New York. And the poster was all part of it, and so that worked really, really well. It won all these awards. So this is my first job out of college, really, and it was, again, talk about building confidence. Once it started with that logo, and then it went to total denial and rejection, to where I was ready to quit. But if it hadn't been for Bonnie, I would have never did what I did in my career. That's why I say, like people say, behind every strong man is a woman. That's the truth. But side by side, we've taken on the last 56 years side by side.
Oh.
He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, really. And honestly, if it hadn't been for her, I would have never stayed. I would have gone back.
Yeah.
And who knows what I would have done. But, so back to this. So that Dolls Alive promotion won all these awards, and it hung in the Union Carbide building in New York. The whole presentation with the records and the albums and all the invitations and the teasers and all that stuff. And there was, in that same Union Carbide building, was a headhunter company that placed graphic artists and designers and stuff. And I got a call one day from this headhunter who said, "Hey, I'm here in the Union Carbide building. I've seen stuff. I'd like to be able to help get you a better job than what you have now, And I said, "Well, I have a good job. I'm actually really happy because I'm the hero."
Yeah.
Got this big promotion. It won all these awards, and but right after I said that to him, and he said, "Well, here's my number. If you change your mind, give me a call because I know I could place you with a really good job." And so I said, "Okay, I'll take your number." A couple days later, that was on a Friday, I think, and Saturday was a company party at Christmas. And at that company party, it was a small company. There was maybe 15 people. I felt like Andy Hardy being let out of the room on everybody's shoulders because I was this major guy that did this great thing. And Carlos Armani was the owner of Carloni and Associates. And Armando said to me at that party, make sure you come see me Monday morning in my office. So I'm like, yeah, this is great. I'm going to get a promotion.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the big cheese in this little company. So I'm a big fish in this little pond. And so come Monday, and I'm talking with Bonnie on the phone, and Armando shows up, and I, I'll call you right after the meeting. I go into the meeting, and I sit down, and he, first of all, thanks me for all of this, and he said, "That's the good news. The bad news is I'm going to have to let you go." And I'm like, honestly, Carrie, and I turned around, I thought he was talking to somebody else. Couldn't be me.
Yeah.
It was telling me that I have to let you go because I don't have the kind of work that will keep you growing in my. What you did for us was the biggest project we'll have all year, and we'll have little things here and there, but you're far too talented here. He said, "You're not going to understand this." I understand, because I was like Homer Simpson. You're blah blah blah. It wasn't sinking in. I mean, on one hand, it's the greatest moment, and on the other hand, it's the worst moment. It's the best of times, the worst of times, right? And so he just said, I know you won't understand this minute, but there will come a time when you'll realize that what we're doing, what I've said to you, it really it resonates. And so, needless to say, I was without a job, and I called his headhunter, and I said, well, I've been giving it some thought. I didn't tell him I was let go. I'm giving it some thought, and I'm in a great place here, and they love me, and, I just sold it really hard. Yeah. And so I said, but, I want to see what you have to offer. So he said, okay, great. And when I went into Manhattan, I met with him, and you sign a thing saying that I'll let these guys represent me. And a couple of days later, he calls me up and he goes, I've got an interview that I want you to go to. It's with Norman Levitt, which was an ad agency in the New York Life building. It was on the 37th floor facing uptown. So if you felt like you were on a birthday cake, it was just beautiful, especially at night in the winter when it's snowing and all the lights are on, and it was like amazing. And so I went to work for Norman Levitt, but it was really kind of funny because I always wanted to work on Madison Avenue. I always wanted to work in an ad agency. And I got this opportunity. I show up for the interview. He's not there yet. Norman Levitt isn't there yet. And I'm watching him. They had one whole floor, one side of the floor facing uptown. So it was a big agency. And Norman Levitt was a retired Marine Corps master sergeant.
Wow.
And he ran that agency like you were in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
With strict rules, and I'm watching this agency come to life. I had an early appointment with him, and I'm watching this. He had a couple of guys that come in with a string, and one's on one end of the studio, and the other one's on the other end, and they string a line, and then line up all the water bowls, they line up all the pencils. It was crazy. Then, people started showing up, and there's this guy who came in who was the head of production. So his job was to smoke 3 packs of cigarettes, drink 2 pots of coffee, and have a major stroke by the end of the day, moving everything through that agency. So I'm sitting here watching all that stuff, and I'm going, is this really what I don't know what really what I want. And so by the time Norman showed up, really nice gentleman, shaved head, kind of scary looking because he was a Marine Corps sergeant. They have a way. You don't just quit being that. You are that your rest of your life. My father-in-law was a Marine Corps guy, and he was a Marine Corps guy forever.
Yeah.
And so, I had this interview with Norman, and he's liking the Dolls Alive stuff. And, he was really liking the album cover that I had done. Because I didn't know why. I mean, he spent a lot of time on the Dolls Alive album cover and stuff. And he said, he leaned back in his chair, he put his glasses up on his forehead. I'll never forget. He said, okay, because I really like your work. What are you looking for as far as the salary? And by this time, I didn't want to work there. Okay, I knew this isn't really again, what my dream was turns out to not be so cool after all. Okay, I think that I'm going to be the head of this agency and be the guy, and this is what an agency's like. I mean, it was a real ad agency. It was on Madison Avenue. It was everything that I wanted, but I didn't want any part of it.
No.
So I said, well, I was making $25,000 before I went. And I said, and I didn't tell him that. I just said, well, I got to have at least 40 or 45,000 a year. And he said, really? Because I knew that would be maybe a game breaker.
Yeah.
Which it was. He said, well, that's a bit more than we were looking to spend. I really like your work. You wouldn't consider taking less? And I said, no, I really can't, because that's only a few dollars more than I'm already making. And so I didn't get the job. It was great. He said, sorry, we just can't do that. And so I left, and I was elated. I was so elated that I took a cab to Brooklyn instead of taking the subway. I was so thrilled that I didn't get this job. Okay, and then by the time I started getting closer to the house, I started thinking, well, I'm going to have to somehow explain to Bonnie why I didn't get that job. Because she had been talking to the headhunter. He would call her while I'm at work, telling her, okay, this is a great opportunity for Ernie. You got to really, make him do it and stuff. And so he was giving her the pep talk to give to me to make sure that I would go take this job. So I'm trying to think of what am I going to tell her? I can't tell her I asked for too much money because I didn't want the job. I mean, this was a good opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. So by the time I get up to the apartment, I open the door and she comes running up. She goes, hey, Norman Levitch has called you. He wants you to call him. And I'm like, okay. So before I had it, and I had devised a scheme of why I didn't get the job. I was ready to give her the excuse, but I didn't have a chance because he wanted me to call him. And this is probably like 8 o'clock at night. And so I call him, and he said, Ernie, he goes, we really like your work. I talked to my partner, and we'd like you to come to work for us. We're going to pay you the extra money.
Wow.
Okay, great. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Because Bonnie's standing right there. I can't go, shit. I mean, it's got to be right there. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really happy. He said, well, if you could come into the office on Saturday, this was, I think, like Wednesday or Thursday. If you could come into the office on Saturday, I'll give you a briefing of what's going on. So I show up that Saturday, and he starts telling me about how he's got this client. He had a lot of Waring blenders and mixers and all these major corporations, Rolf and Farina, Omega watches. He had major clients, but he had this one client that he really loved. He was good friends with the guy there, and it was Decca Records. And Decca Records he had 2 art directors that worked for him there, and they pretty much handled the Decca Records account for him because all the other people were on the corporate work.
Yeah.
And so so these 2 guys decided that they were going to leave his agency, start their own agency, and take Decca Records with them. That happens all the time in the advertising business. It happens all the time. And so he says to me, this is what's happening, and we need to go to Decca Records on Monday to meet with their creative director, and he's going to give us a briefing on what the project is. It's an album cover, and I was really enamored by the album cover that you had done for Dolls Alive. And so I'm like, okay, great. So I show up Monday morning, and we go over to Decca Records, and we meet with the creative director, a guy named Bill Levy. And he was already in favor of the other 2 guys because he had formed a relationship with them over the year or 2 that they had been handling his account. And so he had this comfort level with them. And so, but what had happened was Norman was connected to Decca Records at a much higher level. So he got Decca Records to agree to a shootout, which happens all the time. So it's going to be them against us.
Yeah.
Whoever wins gets the account. And the account was fine. So they had the advantage because they had made Bill Levy's relationship. And Norman had the upper hand because he was connected much higher. But none of that really played into it. It all came down to what, who was going to get the best package. So what you see over there on the left is the Jesus Christ Superstar album. That was the project. And when he told us what it was, there was these 2 kids that nobody ever heard of, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, who had this very controversial
It certainly was,
Christ Superstar. And so the other agents, the other 2 guys had been briefed a week earlier because Norman didn't really have anybody till I came along. So he was kind of in a squeeze play position where he needed to show up with somebody and didn't have anybody to do it. These 2 guys had been doing it. So Bill Levy said, after he briefed us, he said, well, when would you like to present? And this was on a Monday. I said, well, when are the other guys presenting? He said, they're a week from today. They'll be the following Monday. And I said, well, I think we want to present on Friday. And I looked over at the corner of my eye, and Mr. Levy was there, and his fists were clenched, he was biting a hole in his lip because I just spoke out of turn and gave myself no time. And so on the cab ride home to the office, he was he was just furious. He said, "This is an important account to me. I pulled a lot of strings to make this happen, and you're frivolously just within 4 days, you're going to come up with something that this other guy already had 2 weeks up on you." And I said, "Well, I wouldn't worry about it." I said, I think it's important that we be first, because I've always found that if you can be first and you have something really good, you set the bar.
Absolutely.
Okay, and they have to surpass it. So, and I explained that to him, and what could he say? So for the next 3 or 4 days, they just left me alone. I was the leper again, and I did a lot of praying, went to a couple of churches, and just got, I was raised a Catholic. Everything that I had been taught was totally the opposite in this album. We had some tapes of the album, and I listened to it. And so I came up with 4 or 5 ideas. These angels were one of them. And we made the presentation, and Bill Levy loved it. And we had to wait till that next Monday for the other guys to present. But what they had done was, and I should have put it up here, it was a line drawing of a old biblical looking guy with a big beard, and it was called Superstar, because they felt that saying Jesus Christ Superstar was a bad way
just going too far.
It's already it's one step over the line, or 2 steps over the line. So they really put all their eggs in that one basket of Superstar, and I can't believe they did that, because there's no way the director company is going to go back and convince these 2 guys, Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber, to change the name of their play, their opera, because these guys felt that it was not right. So we went out, and over the course of 6 or 7 months till I made my next move, I made a really good friendship with Bill Levy. He took me under his wing. He taught me how to be a creative director. We worked on a half a dozen projects. I did an Aida opera for him, beautiful package. I did 2 other albums for him, Matthew Southern Comfort, a couple of other albums, and so while that was happening, I get a call from the headhunter again. And he's like, "Okay, well, I've got this great opportunity for you." And I said, "Look, there's no way that I can do this. I'm not going to become the guy that's known for staying at a place to jump to the next place. You're right. You're right now, but you're not Mr. Right. And I don't want to become that. And so I'm not going to do that." Well, he went to work on Vine. When I was at work, he'd be calling her and saying, "He's missing a big opportunity here. This is a company that only does album covers, and they're elated over the Jesus Christ Superstar stuff that we've done. And this is a huge opportunity. And so please go to the meeting." So she convinced me that I should please go. And I said to both of them, "I'm going to go, but I'm not going to take the job. I'm not going to do it. I'm good here at this agency now. They've given me my own room," because I had long hair and beard, and this was Madison Avenue making the change to their art director and creative directors had sideburns and bell-bottom pants and vests. It was a time of change there. And I was I was more 60s. I, went to college in Oakland where all the hippies were, and I was kind of like the 60s. So they put me in the back of the agency. There was a supply room that they converted into a studio for me. And then because I did so well for them, they let me hire another guy that had long hair and stuff. So the 2 of us were in this big agency with all these straight guys. And we had music, they couldn't. It was just great. So I'm not leaving there. So I go to this appointment. And it was an agency on 53rd between Park and Madison. It's called Craig Braun. And Craig Braun was a broker. At that time, record companies weren't buying album packaging from printers. They were using brokers. And he was a broker that started out selling stickers that went on albums like Jackson Brown's album contains the hit single Dr. My Eye. So that's what he did. And he got a chance to work with the Velvet Underground. And he did that album, the all-white album with the banana on it, that you peel off and put back. Well, he sold them that sticker, okay? And he got a chance to meet Lou Reed and, the Velvet Underground and Andy Warhol, because they were all part of that scene.
Yeah.
And so I went to his studio, and it was this little three-story brownstone. It was surrounded by skyscrapers, and there was a gyro souvlaki place on the bottom floor. So every day at lunchtime, and we were in the art department, was on the third floor, and every day lunchtime came all this great smells of the souvlaki. I mean, it was a great place to work. Plus, it was good. When I went to the interview, I was there, and I was waiting for Craig, and there were all these young people. There were half a dozen, maybe 7 people. They were all young. Unlike the agency where I was at, I was like the youngest guy. I was like 25. And all these other people are seasoned ad people, in their 30s and 40s. And so I thought, wow, this is just a great place. This is really, it's not on Madison Avenue, but it's close. It's only a half a block away.
Yeah.
And they specialize in album covers. And by this time I realized that my aspirations toward being an ad guy in an agency was really not make me happy. What was going to make me happy was doing album covers. And music. I'd always been a music fan. I couldn't play an instrument, but I loved music. And especially in the 60s, in Oakland with all that whole, thing that was going on there, being part of that music, all the sound was coming from the West Coast now.
Absolutely.
And Actor and stuff like that. So I had, cut my teeth there. Now I'm here in New York, and I've got this appointment with this young agency. So Craig Braun shows up. I go into his office with him, and there's one of his sales guys who's there, and which was his vice president and head of production. Because what he was doing was he was buying album packaging and reselling it to the record companies. And at that same time that was happening, there was a big movement toward board packaging, like for cosmetics or whatever, board, printing directly on board. Up until then, it had been printing on sheets of paper, and then you laminate it to a cover. Whether it's a front and back or an open up, it's all paper laminated to chipboard. And that was what your cover was. Well, there was a big movement going toward board packaging because there was more stuff you could do. There was a tolerance for perfect. With paper, it could be anywhere. It wasn't the way you could line up embossing or die cutting and stuff and have it be accurate. The only way you could do that would be to do board packaging. And Craig had an arrangement with a company called Ivy Hill, which was the biggest board printer in the country in 3 different locations in the United States. So he had this deal with them, and they wanted to get into the album cover business because it was right where they were. I mean, that's their sweet. A couple of other companies like AGI and Birdco that were printing paper, and AGI was converting over to printing more board. They were out of Chicago. Birdco was out in Los Angeles, but they just printed paper mounted to board. So, this opportunity with this company was really great, as he explained it to me. And then he started telling me about how he had grown up with Marshall Chess. His dad owned Chess Records in Chicago.
Another legend.
And sold it to Atlantic. Atlantic made him president, and he put his son Marshall in charge of managing the Rolling Stones, Marshall Chess. And he and Marshall were friends, and Marshall had come to him for a logo. And it's really funny because as I look back at all of this, there was really, it's all about timing. Everything is about timing.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, being in the right spot at the right time, with the right stuff. And timing is more important than connections, more important than money, more important than talent. It's got to be the right time for all that to happen in the sequence. So it just so happened that the creative director that Craig had come down with a spinal infection that paralyzed him. And he was paralyzed from the neck down, and he couldn't do, but Marshall had already come to him with this project. And he needed a logo for the Rolling Stones. And so he's looking at the Dolls Alive stuff. And he pulls the record out of it. First of all, he loved the package because it was a board package. There was no way that could be paper mounted board with all the edges and stuff. So he loved that, turned it over, opened up the back of it, and pulled the record out, and he sees what you're seeing there in that label. And he starts telling me the story about him and Marshall coming to him with this project. And he said, if you take these lips and you go upstairs to my art department and you put a tongue on the outside of it, I think I could sell this to the Rolling Stones. So I went upstairs to his art department. Took me about 15 minutes. I drew the lips, I drew the tongue. First I drew it straight, down, not off to the angle. But then it would look kind of lame, and the
Mm.
Rolling Stones were really animated, so I put it off to one side, added some teeth, went back downstairs to his office, showed it to him. He goes, "Okay, perfect. Wait here." So he goes downstairs. He had a big window, a bay window in his office on the second floor, and you could see down in the street. He walked down there, got into a cab, and went to Andy Warhol's factory in Lower Manhattan, where Marshall was. So he shows Marshall the logo, and about an hour and a half go by. Meanwhile, I'm partying with his employees because every day they'd light up and it would be a great party. And so I'm like, yeah, this is definitely where I want to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is it. I don't care whether it's on Madison Avenue or not. It's close enough, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And it's something that I love doing. And so, sure enough, he comes back, puts the sketch down on the desk, and he goes, "Okay," because they love it. I need you to do the finish art on it. And I did. It took me as a freelancer, and that's why I own that art.
Mm-hmm.
I was a freelancer. I wasn't working for him at the time. So I went away. I did that tongue, final art, and then I also did a display for Columbia Records, one of his clients. And we did this in-store counterpart display. Really beautiful. Came out really. And so I gave him all the art, and I got a job and $200
Wow.
for doing that photo. Yeah, which was, it didn't matter. The
No.
money didn't. It was about the opportunity,
Absolutely.
And people say, well, aren't you mad that you didn't get more or that you don't have any kind of, no, because what I didn't get from it initially, I've more than tripled whatever I would have gotten by all the other stuff that enabled me to do. Okay, and that logo really, people know it, and the Rolling Stones, God bless them, are still going full blast. And so I ended up working for him. I went to work for him, did the Rolling Stones piece. I did Grand Funk Railroad album, Deplorable Funk, which is a big silver coin. And then he had come to me and asked if I would be willing to go to LA with his vice president of sales, who I didn't really get along with, where sales and marketing and advertising, the graphic, they just don't get along. They're two separate things. And so he asked me, because the record industry was moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, he asked me if I would be willing to go with his vice president and set up a corporate office, a satellite office in Los Angeles, because all the sound was coming from there in San Francisco.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and so it made sense to, and Ivy Hill had a big office there in LA, and so it really made sense for him to kind of do that. And I wanted to try and find this background. Can you see these backgrounds?
No, but your green screen, so what I can do with my software, I can put them on.
Yeah, well, then, and you have them. So the next thing, so we came out, Tony and I came out to Los Angeles for Craig. And when I found out that I was coming, there were two bands. By this time, I'm reading Billboard, Record World, and a few other music publications, Cashbox. There were only a few, and that's only where you get the information. There was no internet.
No.
And, between those publications and disc jockeys, that's where you found out about everything.
Yeah.
So by this time, I'm reading from cover to cover all those magazines. And in Billboard magazine, there's a section called Bubbling Under. And Bubbling Under was all about who's going on tour, who's in the studio recording, who's doing this, who's doing that. And I read that two groups that I was really, really interested in were both doing albums. One of them was Alice Cooper, okay, and they had a title called School's Out for this album. They were with Bob Ezrin in the studio and finishing that up. And then Cheech and Chong, who I love. Dave's not here. That was just, I knew all that stuff by heart. We would listen to it over and over again. And so I made, because they're in LA, I'm in LA, we were promised a lot of work by the guy we worked for, from A&M Records, who he had an association with a guy named Joe Friesen that was running the label, and they were going to give us all this work. Well, that never materialized, but that's another story. anyway, knowing that I was going to be out there and knowing that I was going to be on the A&M lot, okay, Cheech and Chong were on Ode Records, and Ode was on, that was Lou Adler, and they were on the lot for A&M Records as well. So I figured at some point, if I could get on that lot, I could get to Lou Adler, show him this comp. So I did a comp, which is like what you see there in that Cheech and Chong thing. That's a comp with Ruby Lith and markers and stuff, and I did the lettering and everything. And I had this with the pull-out cigarette paper. I had a comp on that, and I had a comp on Schools Out, which was the desk, right?
Amazing idea.
Yeah, and so I figured, you know, I'm going to take these out there. Somehow I can get to these acts and show them these covers because they're both in the studio. So I come out to LA with Tony, and Craig rented us an apartment that we had to share, and Bonnie had come out with me, and she stayed in San Jose, and I would fly back and forth on the weekends. It was only like $13 each way. So I would fly home on Friday, come back on Sunday, because Craig wouldn't rent her and I a separate apartment. He only rented one apartment for Tony and I. So during that time, where we're, you know, trying to get this work that was promised and it never materialized, and month and a half go by. I had a 3-month contract. I was coming out here to set up an art department. Tony was coming out here to set up the business, and I was going to set up an art department and, you know, employ a couple of artists, and then I was going to go back to New York and be, you know, and be the creative director at the East Coast office. And because I love New York, I didn't want to come back to California.
No.
It ended up being, you know, a 3-month deal. And Bonnie came out with me too because it gave her a chance to see her folks we hadn't seen in a while. And so we were trying to get this work that was promised, and we weren't getting anything. I mean, it was like back when I was trying to get my first job in New York. I mean, nothing was happening that was promised. And so about a month and a half in, by this time, Tony and I had really bonded. We were sharing the same fish bowl. Both of us fish in a different bowl. And I was a little more apt to it because he was a New Yorker and never really been to California, and so he was kind of fishing on the water. Got to bond and depended on each other. And so I showed him the comps. I didn't show anybody them. I just brought them out with me. So I showed him the school desk for Alice Cooper, and I showed him this big bamboo cigarette papers from Cheech and Chong. And I said, maybe, you know, why don't you help me? My plan was to somehow get to these guys. Why don't we do this together? And so, sure enough, he picks up the phone, calls Lou Adler at Ode Records. Lou takes his call, and he says, look, we know Cheech and Chong are in the studio. We've got the creative directors, did the Rolling Stones stuff, and Jesus Christ Superstar, all these other things. We have an idea that we'd like to share with you. And no obligation on your part. If you don't like it, no cost.
Yeah, fair enough.
He agreed to see us. And then he picked up the phone again, and he called Shep Gordon at Live, which was Alice's manager. And he said basically the same thing. We have a cover that we'd like to show you. No obligation on your part. If you just give us 20 minutes, you know, we can make the presentation. And he said, have you ever seen Alice perform? And Tony said, no. Because, you either went to a concert, there was no television showing it or YouTube.
No, it's any way to see it live.
So and this is 71, it was toward the end of 71. And he said, well, look, Alice is going to be at the Palladium this weekend. Why don't you guys come? We'll put you on the list, and you can get in, and then we'll have a meeting on Monday after you see him perform. So we agreed, and we went to the Palladium, and it was canned heat open for them. But everybody was there to see Alice Cooper, because that was like phenomenal. You didn't know whether he was a man or a woman. Didn't know whether he was going to kiss you or fight you. He was this crazy guy, gal, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and he had a snake. You know. And so Shep was brilliant. Shep was the P.T. Barnum of our time. He promoted that concert like, if you've got a weak heart or any kind of condition like that, don't come to this concert. And we're going to have doctors and nurses on site, you know, for those faint of heart who shouldn't come to this concert. Well, that's like telling a kid the candy store.
Absolutely, it is. Brilliant marketing.
Oh, yeah, don't touch anything. So anyway, the place is packed, and we're there, and we're watching the show. I mean, the canned heat came on and off. I mean, nobody really cared, and they were there for Alice. So Alice comes out, they start doing their sets, and it's really great. He's got the makeup on, he's got the snake. And there's a heckler when they're doing the cats, the alley cats and the jets or whatever that came up on. Sorry, yeah, they're doing that, and there's this heckler in the crowd, and Alice isn't paying any attention to him at first, and the guy's getting louder and louder, and so at one point Alice says, "Why don't you come up here and say that?" The guy goes up on stage. Alice pulls out a switchblade and stabs the guy. The guy falls over. The lights go out. People are screaming. You can hear nobody. It was dark. You couldn't see anything. And then the lights come back on a few minutes later, and there's Alice in a straitjacket, and he's going up in front of the judge. The judge is up on this podium, and he sentences him to death. Lights go out. You know, people are still just ready. They don't know what's going on. Lights come back on, and now he's going up the steps to the gallows, okay, where the noose is there. They put the around his neck. The drummer's giving the roll, you know, and people are like, they don't know what to think. They don't know what to think.
No.
The bottom falls out of the gallows, and Alice is there dangling up and down, and people are screaming and yelling.
It was amazing.
Lights go out. This time they're out for like 5 minutes. Nobody's left. The lights come back on. Nobody's on stage. They start pounding their feet, yelling and screaming, encore, encore. No encore. Nothing. So eventually people leave. And what you do is you go turn on your radio and listen to the disc jockey and hear what they have to say, you know, in your local station. They're all doing this thing, well, you know, we heard that there was an accident that happened at the Alice Cooper concert tonight, and he may have hung himself. And I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy that, and Shep was just promoting. He had dialed in these major stations that everybody listened to that would comply with it to go on with this shtick about how Alice had hung himself by mistake. So there's this big, you know, should we go to the meeting on Monday? Because maybe it's not appropriate to show up and Alice killed himself. So we decided we're going to go. We show up, it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, and we go into Shep's office, and there's Alice, and they're drinking beer. You know, and it's like, oh my God, you know, they just blew everybody's mind. And from that day on, we became part of the Alive family. And, you know, I've done 13 albums for Alice, and it's great.
Yeah,
what you see on some of these, besides the big bamboo cover, you know, we've got the Licorice Pizza Girl. Licorice Pizza was a chain of record stores in LA, and that girl holding the smoking record is a logo that we did for them. And then what you're seeing here is the some of the album covers that Pacific Eye and I did right out of the box. You know, Yasu, Jefferson Airplane, Doors. We were able to. And that $5 shoes cover that's right there in the front, was nominated for a Grammy the same year that Schools Out was nominated, and I was cheated out of the credit for that because the guy that I worked for took credit for it.
Oh, wow.
He was pretty upset because I took his vice president and I took his head of production to start our own company, Pacific Eye and Ear, and that's what you see there in the upper left corner, key logo. And that we opened our doors in January 1, 1972, and we went on to, you know, do all these album covers. I was able to surround myself with people that were much better than I was. It only made me be better. You know,
well, it pushes you on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I had guys like Bill Garland and Drew Struzan and Joe Garnett, you know, Carl Ramsey, Joe Patagno, who did all the Motorhead covers, and, you know, all these guys that were in the art. I had like 6 illustrators to choose from for projects that I would come up with the concept and lettering for. Because my main contribution was the concept and the letter.
Yeah.
So, and then I had these illustrators that could execute, and the record business was also, along with all the other changes that was going on, it was moving from photography to illustration. So, and unlike, you know, hypnosis we talked about earlier, they were mainly photography. We were mainly illustration, and we built a very strong illustration line. Guys like Drew Struzan, who is today the most collected illustrator in the world. He did all the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Star Wars, all those movie covers.
Yeah.
And, you know, we probably worked on about 85 or 90 projects over the 4 years we worked together. And I have 73 of his originals in my arsenal of original album cover art. I have 350 pieces. of original album cover art
Wow.
and music-related pieces in my collection. And so that's become really good because I have the licensing rights to license prints and stuff like that. I sold a few pieces. There's a couple of avid album cover art collectors that really like what I have.
Absolutely.
So, and these pieces have become iconic. I mean, it's really funny how they've become like Welcome to My Nightmare. You see that's a Struzan oil painting.
Absolutely.
Huge, 30 by 40. The Doors covered there is a Joe Garnett illustration. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath is a front and back covered Big Man and Evil Man, both at the split second of that. And so I have all these originals. And I was at the Smithsonian for 18 months in Memphis with an album cover show. And then I had 2 or 3 other gallery shows and another museum show at Forest Lawn in Glendale. Where I had a 6-month show. So these pieces have gotten around, and the Doors album, the Full Circle album, I don't know whether you're familiar with that album.
Oh, yeah.
But where the zoetrope pops out,
Mm-hmm.
put it on your record. I mean, I think that was probably one of the pinnacles of custom design packaging. I was really into trying to get the fan more involved than just taking the record out of a sleeve and putting it on a record player and listening to it.
It was all part of the package, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was a total experience.
Mm.
You couldn't be at a concert. You could be putting together a zoetrope, or you could be folding the Jefferson Airplane box up into a cigar box, and putting your pot in it. So there were all these things that I felt were involving the fan more, and getting them physically involved. And that's what I've tried to, and while we were doing all this album cover stuff, even when I was in New York, I always freelanced in the corporate world. Because I never wanted to be the guy that just did album covers.
No.
And it's very easy to get pigeonholed. So I wanted to make sure I was diverse enough to have a wider range of stuff that I worked on, industries that I've worked in. And today you'd be hard pressed to name an industry that I haven't done work in. Plus the album cover stuff, which really sort of was what established it all and still is relevant today. Consumers really, they realize that they rediscover music. Every generation rediscovers it.
They do,
Once they discover the music, they then discover the packaging. So, it's kind of really neat to know that kind of stuff is
especially with the resurgence of vinyl as well, because CDs, it doesn't have the same visual impact as it has as the original vinyl package.
Yeah, it is, exactly. And so, it became a big plus for us, to then help us go into the corporate world. As by the mid 80s, the record business for us was becoming very negative. I mean, there were art students coming out of Art Center with a project of an album cover, and they'd be willing to do an album cover for $250. And the basic price that we could do an album cover for was $1,500, $2,500, and that's all in with the illustration, the technical concept, the design, the lettering, everything. And today, it's funny because those pieces are worth lots of money today. I've come to realize that, which is really great because they're, like I said, they're avid collectors out there that want to have those graphics. And,
absolutely. What would you say is your favorite
album?
Whatever, what artwork, what creation of yours do you really look at and go, oh wow?
That's really a hard one because it's like having children. I don't have any children, but I know that these are my children, what I create. If I were to have children, it would be hard to choose between my favorite. I love each one of the pieces for different reasons. There are some covers that we had to do very quickly, like a Monkeys Greatest Hits, and we did a Fifth Dimension Greatest Hits. We didn't have any budget. There was really nothing to work with. We had to sort of create something from nothing. And so those would be my least favorite. I still like them, but they're my least favorite. And then I've got other things like, Alice Cooper, the 13 albums for him, and Grandpa Fellow, and Black Oak, Arkansas, we did 8 albums for them. And George Kenny Rankin, all these people that I've done many albums for. Some will come back once, Rolling Stones never used anybody more than once. As designers, they use them once and that's it. You know, don't go back. I guess that's a way of keeping fresh.
I
It's a
suppose
way of,
so.
yeah. And so, I'd love to do another album cover for them, but I don't think that's going to happen. Because of that record of not going back.
Yeah.
They don't look back. They only look forward, which I can dig it. I understand. You
Yeah.
don't want to dwell. I had written this thing once about how I want to keep on creating history instead of becoming it. And it's really true. You can very easily become history. Very easily. And because you see, it's like one hit wonders in the record business. You'll have a major hit, major number one hit globally, and then nothing ever again. And it's so, but they live on that. They live on that one thing, and I don't ever want to live on one thing. All of my things I are my favorites, and it's hard. It would be very hard. Like I said, the ones that we had very little, but there was a Kane Roberts. He's a guitar player. That was with
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we did an album. We did his first album cover. There was absolutely no budget. There was crappy photography, and we had to put together something in about 3 days. And that sometimes, that becomes a real challenge. But I think all things considered, we did a good job. It isn't the best cover we ever did. I'm not really proud of it, but I list it in the 250 album covers that I've done.
Yeah.
I list that one because, again, it's not the red-headed stepchild at the table, but it's close to it. It's still at the table. But it's the record business for us was very, very amazing in the beginning, and then, like I said, it's by the 80s, mid 80s. Part of that reason was because the record companies, in order to sign groups, would give them all these rights. Like you could decide who was going to produce it. You could decide who was going to design it. You could design who was going to, record it. All these things they got. And they found out as time went on that was a big mistake because groups would spend 25 cents on an album cover and they'd sell 10 albums.
Yeah.
And so the record company would get screwed. I mean, they were used to spending between 5 and 6 cents for a paper wrap front and back. Now on board, twice that much. So, and every group wanted a board package, every group wanted all this stuff. And they found out that was really a problem, and they started taking it all back. New groups that were being signed didn't have those rights. So it got even less for us. And our biggest competitor in the album cover design business was really, because there were only like 3 or 4 companies like Pacific Pioneer. Hypnosis was one of them, but here in the States there was only like 3. And so there wasn't a lot of competition, but our major competitors were the record companies themselves because they all had their own art departments.
Yeah.
And so, they would lay the heavy spiel on the groups that, hey, why would you go buy an album cover from Pacific Pioneer and we'll do it here for you for free? Well,
keep it all in-house.
Yeah, it was really a big lie because there was a bass player in Iron Butterfly, a guy named Lee Dorman, who then became the head guy at Captain Beyond. They were a heavy metal group in the early 70s, and they were a reformation of Iron Butterfly. And Lee and I became really good friends, and he got hit with that, hey, why don't you come here and let us show you what we can do for you. Art department, meet the creative directors, and we're going to do all of this for you for free. Well, Lee did some digging around and found out not only were they not doing it for free, it would be about 3 times what we would charge. Because they had more places to hide the money. We didn't have any place to hide the money. We were what we were.
Yeah.
Record companies had recording studios, rehearsal studios. They had tours. They had PR. They had all these where they could put some money. And when you added it all up, and so Lee found out about all that. Lee was he was like a Sherlock Holmes. He was amazing. He loved doing that kind of stuff. And in those days, all the groups kind of knew each other. I guess they still do today, but they were touring together. It was a small community, and they all knew each other. And so Lee spread the word that, hey, you're not getting it for free. You're paying a lot more than you would pay if you went to Pacific Pioneer. So he became a good salesman for us as well. He had signed Captain Beyond to Capricorn's label. Capricorn, which was the Allman Brothers label, Capricorn Records.
Right.
And they were, when we had the office for Craig Bronnick we had set up, they were on the same floor, just a couple doors down. So we would go over there and hang out with Phil Walden, who managed Otis Redding and a whole bunch of other acts, and the Allman Brothers, and now Captain Beyond. And we got to meet Dickie Betts. And that's where I met Lee Dorman. And you know, they loved our work, and we did some, you know, for Capricorn, but we also worked for Captain Beyond, which was great. And so, you know, that whole thing kind of ended pretty much. We went from doing 6 to 8 album covers a month to doing maybe 4 or 5 a year, because the record business had really sort of changed completely now, and by the mid 80s. And luckily we had another foot into the corporate world, which is what you're seeing here. Some of the things I did for major corporations. I was Nestle's agency. I was one of their 16 agencies for 30 years, and I got to work on 5 of their 6 divisions. What you see there, the Butterfinger brand, I got a chance to work on in their confections division for all their candy bars and snacks and all that stuff. And Butterfinger was one of the brands that they had. And the guy that gave me my first break at Nestle now was in the confections. He had moved over from pastas and sauces to confections, and he was managing Butterfinger. And they had had a great success with Bart Simpson, be a spokesperson for Butterfinger. It took it from a sleepy old brand to a major competitor with Bart Simpson. Okay, so that was really well, because the brand manager of Butterfinger, and this was before my guy came in, was good friends with the guy who created The Simpsons. So they cut this deal, and when that happened, The Simpsons were on the Tracy Ullman show. They were little bumper spots on the Tracy Ullman show.
That's right, they were, yeah.
Yeah, they made Bart Simpson the spokesperson for Butterfinger. Well, after a few years, after the first year, there was a corporate meeting, and they were ready to dump Bart Simpson and break the contract because he was an underachiever. He represented everything that Nestle didn't. Nestle was the high on the mountain company that was pure with things, and Bart Simpson was an underachiever. And then the CFO showed the group there the money that had been made by Bart Simpson taking on that brand, and so they forgot about getting rid of Bart Simpson. A couple years later, and which is what everybody does. They go for the money. And so a couple years later, the contract was up. The Bart Simpson people wanted more money because it was very successful. Nestle didn't want to pay anymore and thought they could get away with not using it, so they dropped the contract. And the brand started declining. So my guy comes in to manage it, and he comes to me and says, look, we don't have Bart Simpson anymore. We need something that's going to give us a boost. We need something that's going to be talking to this younger audience, who then became big advocates for Butterfinger. You know, all these kids skateboarding, all loving Bart Simpson.
Well, yeah, I mean,
they can appeal to that audience. And I came back with an idea of, at that time, MTV was broadcasting spring break in Florida. That was the big thing. Every spring break, and all the kids would go there, and MTV was there for the whole thing. So I came up with this idea of give them the finger, Butterfinger, which in those days, when I was young, when you gave somebody the finger, you ended up in a fight.
Yeah.
Okay. And at this time in the 80s, grunge and punk and all that was in, and give them the finger was an acceptance. It was like, hey man, you're really cool, you know. And so I came back to them with this give the finger, Butterfinger idea, and the guy who took over the brand loved it. And what the idea was to print up shirts and go to spring break in Florida and give the shirts away for free. Give them to everybody that you can give a shirt. And they're going to wear them and get on TV with it. And everybody's going to see give the finger, Butterfinger, and it's going to be so cool. And the guy that brought us in loved it, but when he went to the higher ups, they freaked out. They really freaked out. They said, there's no way we can do this. This is not. But you don't understand. The audience that you're appealing to, you're trying to hit, love
No, but they're thinking.
No, you know.
Yeah, corporate minds.
It's a bad thing, and we're not bad. You know, we'll go for the money, but we're not bad. So we ended up doing, I think, 100 shirts, and it went to all the executives. All the executives took the shirts, and we didn't do the promotion. But then later on, the same guy who had handled Butterfinger got what they call their drive brand. Drive brands were like Turtles and
Yeah.
100 brand bar, and Nestle chocolate, the cream chocolate bar,
Mm.
milk chocolate. And when he took over, we did the Butterfinger thing. They rejected, but shortly thereafter, he said, there's this opportunity and by this time I'm working really good with this guy. I mean, he really loves me. I've done some stuff for them, a great sales meeting for him, and that's a whole other story. But anyway, we had formed a relationship, and so I was his go-to guy, and I was on the authorized vendor list. There were only the building was filled with marketing people, but no, and business people and lawyers, but no creative people. They used outside agencies, and you had to be on their authorized vendor list, and we were able to get on that list. We were there were only like 16 of us that were on that list, and we were the smallest agency. But we kept taking work away from these big companies. Anyway, he came to me and said, "Look, we've got this opportunity with Disney, and we're not sure. I've been told by people that are running above me that you might want to just back away from this opportunity. We may not want to get involved in it." So we set up a meeting with the Disney people to talk with them about this opportunity and to see if we wanted to get involved with it. So we met with them, great people at Disney, and then we saw some rough cuts of Lion King, which was the movie that they needed help on. And so I came up with this idea, looking at the Nestle bars, and a lot of the candy bars do it, they put the word Nestle in the chocolate. So they embossed the Nestle logo in the chocolate. And it's on their basic milk chocolate bar that was maybe $30 million a year in chocolate. It was not Butterfinger, not any of those upper brands that were really in there, Rocky or Baby Ruth and some of those other ones. And so I came up with this idea of taking frames from the movie and embossing them, the animation frames, and embossing them in the chocolate. And I did this packaging for it. And what you see there, the Lion King did so well. They sold $30 million worth of chocolate in the first 2 months.
Wow.
Where before that, they had only sold $30 million all year. So what we did there was really something big for them, and so big for Disney and their relationship with Nestle that they gave us Toy Story, they gave us Pocahontas, and they gave us, a Lion King. So we did the same basic thing, embossing frames from the film into the chocolate bars. And so that was really kind of a neat opportunity for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so some of the other corporate stuff that you see here, next to the Butterfinger logo at the top, is Alltech Lansing. When we started going after major corporations as clients, because we had little clients here and there, nothing really big. Through Black Oak, Arkansas, who we were the agency for, they were going to be doing an endorsement, or the guitar player was doing an endorsement ad with a kickbox company for kickboxes for guitar players. And they wanted to do an endorsement ad, and their manager, Butch Stone, said, "Okay, yeah, we'll do it, but you have to deal with our agency, Pioneer." So a guy named Rich Mandela shows up at our doorsteps representing the kickbox company. Turns out he was one of the first roadies for Rolling Stones when they first came to America. He knew the guys that I knew. He knew that I had done the logo. I knew that he was a roadie. We really bonded. So through this, not long after we did that endorsement ad for Black Oak, he left that company and joined Alltech. And he became the liaison person between the bands and the speaker company, Alltech Lansing Speaker Company. It was started as Alltech. It was the voice of the theater speakers. When Al Jolson sang in the first Pocky movie, it was through an Alltech speaker, voice of the theater speaker that you heard.
Yeah.
But they've been around for a long time. They had a young engineer named James B. Lansing, and he went off and started JBL, and then came back to them a couple years later to do a joint venture with Alltech for their bookshelf speakers. They created a line of bookshelf speakers that were for younger people, very affordable, incredible speakers, and gave us, and we were brought in as to compete for this account. It was $1 million account, and we competed against 6 other major agencies. And the one up that we had on all the other agencies was the guys at Alltech really loved us. They loved the fact that we were into rock and roll and we had done all these albums. And so we kind of had a leg up on that, and we came up with this idea of calling them the Volk speakers. People for, speakers for the people, speakers for people from the people at Alltech Lansing. That was the tagline we did it.
Cool.
We ripped off the gray advertising Volkswagen.
Yeah.
Where the top 2/3 was a picture, black and white, and then the bottom third was all the copy. Well, we kind of took that format and created Volk speaker ads and ran them in all the music publications, and it looked just like a Volkswagen ad. Like Volkswagen did an ad where there was a beautiful Volkswagen side view, and it said lemon, and it was the headline. And then you read that even though this car looks beautiful, there was a flaw in it, and it never hit sales offices because it had this flaw. So we did a picture of a bookshelf speaker, a beautiful speaker, and we called it Turkey. And the thing was that it had a flaw, so it never hit the music store. So, we kind of took that whole thing and created this campaign that did really, really well. They were getting stacks of letters. Dear people at Alltech Lansing, love your stuff, and it was great. And anyway, the guy that brought us in, it was the roadie for the Rolling Stones, had this Porsche, and he always wanted to race it. It was a 914 Porsche, and he didn't have the money to really do it. He wanted to run in the Laguna Seca series of races, but he had this Porsche, so we took it, and it became the vehicle that we promoted the Volk speakers from. Cindy Wood is the woman that you see there. She was Playmate in 1976. She was in the Apocalypse Now movie when the girls come out of the helicopters. Yeah, she was the main one, and we became really good friends with her. We got her to be Miss Volk speaker, and we designed all the aftermarket spoilers and stuff on this car, which were later on duplicated by other people that were in the 914 Porsche world. So we created this car, painted it, made it look beautiful. The only problem was it didn't have an engine because we didn't have the budget to put an engine in. So what we would do is we would show up to the races, and we'd set the car up, and we had these big floor monitor speakers, 4 of them, and we would blast rock and roll music. And we had Cindy and other girls dressed in the jumpsuits that we did, signing posters. We did Speed of Sound posters with this Porsche and her in it, and they would sign. But we had people for hours standing in line to get posters signed with them, and we did it so well that Camel Cigarettes, that was sponsoring the series, would bring their car and their girl over to our area and hand out stuff there because we were stealing everybody's thunder with this promotion. Nobody was doing anything like that. One of the things that I realized about Pacific Pioneer was back in the day they called it out of the box thinking. Today it's called disruptive. We were very disruptive. Everything we did was disruptive. It was just crazy because we figured, coming from the record business, that's what you had to do. So even though, the record business had sort of dried up for us, what we learned there, we applied over to the corporate world. And thinking out of the box or thinking disruptive was the way to go because that was the younger audience that we needed to appeal.
Yeah.
And so, we were very much that. One of the things you see up there is the hub, which is this environmental thing that was, we were hired by Coca-Cola. They brought us to Atlanta to meet with them. And that, I'll tell you, they got their own zip code there. Coca-Cola is huge. And so we met with these people that were involved with creating environments in shopping malls and airports where people could go and charge their phones and, sit in a Coca-Cola environment. And it was pretty boring. It looked like you were in a Coca-Cola ad. So they weren't really getting the kind of turnout that they were hoping. And so what we did was we came up with the idea of calling it the hub, connecting you to the world. And what it was this environmental thing where you could become part of it. Kind of what we were doing in the album cover thing, where we would sit there and you construct something and it would get you more involved. Well, this was more sitting there and charging your phone. This was experiencing a circus, if you will, of all these different things. There were sections where you could put yourself on the screen, and all these different things. We had people submitting videos. And you got to remember, this was probably like 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The internet was just really getting big. People were creating videos and stuff to put on the internet in hopes of being discovered. We called, for entries, and we would view the ones, and we put them on in the environment, so your video could be played on this Coca-Cola platform. And you can't see it too well, but the hub, and I've sent you individual images, so you can put them up. The hub logo that I created, I wanted it to have, I wanted it to be current. I'm not a designer that chases fads or trends.
No.
I'm more lifestyle, timeless kind of thing. Kind of got that, I guess, from the Beatles music. It sounds like it recorded yesterday, a lot of it. And so I wanted to always do something that wasn't chasing a fad, because they're short-lived.
Absolutely.
Yes. The stuff that you're looking at could have been done yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's what, yeah, that's what I was really striving and trying to do. So I created this environment. We actually built one in Costa Rica, in an airport there. It was beautiful. And then the economy went into the dumper. It was planned to be in 14 different countries. I actually went there with my computer guy and gave a presentation to representatives of 14 different countries. We put a whole deck together showing this environment, and they bought into it. And we built the first one, and then, like I said, the economy dumped. And, it was like that. Alltech, even though we had all the great response that we had, when there was a change of leadership, we were gone.
Yeah.
They bring their own people in, they think they need a change, and that happens all the time. So you can't really be bummed out. I can only be, it's like the Rolling Stones now. Am I bummed out that I never did another thing for them? No, because I did one thing, and that's all I need.
You just keep moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. Keep moving forward, never look back. Brings me back to with Bonnie and saying, I'm coming home, and she said, you come home, I'm gone. My whole life has been like that. And timing, being in the right spot at the right time.
Yeah.
And that leads me to this other image here, which is the guy with the tiger. That was done for Flying Tiger Air Freight. Flying Tiger Air Freight was the mercenaries during the Korean War. They had the planes, they had the tiger's teeth painted on them. With the eyes, they blast music as they're bombing people. All right, well, those pilots came back to America after the war and started an air freight company. Okay, it was called Flying Tiger Air Freight.
Wow.
They hired us. We did their logo. We did all the graphics. And this graphic was a route map. They had just picked up a bunch of new routes, because with air freight, as well as airplanes, you want to get the routes. Routes are really important. So they had just gotten a bunch of routes, and we did this map that you only see in the art, because on the finished piece there's names and lines going to the different destinations and stuff. But this was a Drew Struzan piece that it's beautiful. It's a 30 by 40. It's all done in acrylic and colored pencil. The guy and the tiger are colored pencil, which is one of the hardest forms of illustration to do. Colored pencil, because it's got a paraffin wax base, and you can't keep going over it. You can't keep blending it, so the surface won't take it. And so you have to be really good at it. And Drew was the best. He's absolutely gorgeous, and a very talented guy, that I had the fortune to work with. And I wanted to see, I'm going to bring up this other image right here. Is there any questions that I'm missing on, Carrie?
No, I think we've covered everything really, and it's been wonderful talking to you. And I could talk to you for hours and hours. But what I would just say though is there any advice that you could give somebody who wants to get into design and graphics and album covers? And is there one piece of wisdom from Ernie that would stand him in good stead?
You don't want Ernie's wisdom, it's all messed up. No. Here's what I would say to that. I've had that question usually by parents who have kids that want to go on to be artists and stuff. And I always answer it the same way. The first thing I would do is make sure that person got some legal classes. Go to a junior college, get some basic legal classes, because you're creating, and what you're creating can very easily become somebody else's property.
Yes.
The artist really got screwed over on that whole deal. Musicians, you take 3 or 4 bars from their music, they'll sue you.
Yeah.
Artists, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, because you had asked me that question before. Am I happy about that? No, I'm not, because we have.
I wasn't sure whether you wanted to talk about it, but as you brought it up.
Well, I think it's important that for young people to know. They never taught us that in school.
No.
I went to 5 years of art school, one of the best in the country. They never gave us we took math, we took English, we took geography, but it was all related to art, math, the mathematical composition, to put a composition, that formula. So it was all music related, and but what they really need to do is get some legal classes, so what you have and what you're offering, can very easily be taken away from you, which I've had happen.
Yes.
And from examples that we'll see here in a minute, you'll see what I'm talking about. But it's important that as a creative person, because without what you come up with, they got nothing. They got nothing.
No.
So it's good to be best at what you do and strive. Don't, like you said earlier, don't ever give up. No matter what people tell you, it's following a dream. I've been very blessed to be able to follow my dream, have a dream and follow it. I mean, it's just so, and I've run adversity, all the time. People say, well, you only live once. No, that's not true. You die once. You live every day. You live every day, and I live every day.
Absolutely.
And that's another piece of advice I would give somebody, and stick with it. I mean, you'll find out eventually. Eventually, you'll find out, because if you stick with it long enough, you're going to get the opportunity. It may take a while, but look at these movie stars, the rock stars, Dave Seeger, Bob Seger. It was 30 years before he had the big hit.
It was, yeah.
Been playing little clubs and stuff like that, and then the night movie became a huge hit, and it happens all the time. And you usually find out that ones that happen that way have staying power.
Yeah.
So if you stick with it and you get your opportunity, maximize that opportunity, and you'll get that opportunity. It'll come along. It always has. The problem is, don't give yourself a time. Like, if I don't do this in 2 weeks, I'm done. If I don't do this in 2 years, I'm done. I had a very good friend that was an actor, comedian, singer. Guy was amazing. Looked like Christopher Lloyd from Back to the Future. Crazy look, really good. He could do anything, sing, dance. He gave himself 2 years in Hollywood. Didn't happen. He went back and went to work for his dad's business.
Shame.
And who knows? It could have been 2 years and a week. That next week could have been it. It could have been the one, and you got to stick with it. You just got to stick with it. So
and as you say, be savvy against people that want to usurp your work and take.
I get that all the time.
Yeah.
I had some guys that were had a great product, but that before they hired me, they wanted me to tell them what I would do. And I'm like, no, you don't get it.
No, that's not how it works.
The way I would do it is what I sell. You have to pay for that. I've got 53 years of experience to go into what I do. Okay, so I don't just frivolously throw something out there. I put a lot of work, sweat, equity into it. And I think it shows. The work shows. It speaks for itself. And in fact, while we're talking about this, before I get to this frame, let's go back to the other one that we just talked about, so we can talk a little bit.
Absolutely.
This one here. Okay, and what it is the Bee Gees album that I had done, and the Welcome to My Nightmare covered, and one of the things that we talked about was, am I happy, about how people can just take something and call it their own, and it happens all the time. I mean, the Bee Gees thing with Foo Fighters. David Grohl they did a tribute to the Bee Gees. They took my lettering and they made it a D instead of a B, and it's the rest of it's my lettering, and they never asked permission. And I have no rights. They call it a parody. They call it a tribute. and they can get away with it. They can
Yeah.
do it, whatever they
Mm.
want, and so that doesn't make me happy. At least they
No.
could. It's funny because Jesus Christ Superstar, I get at least 3 or 4 requests a year from different community playhouses or colleges that are putting
Mm.
on. Can we use your logo? Absolutely, absolutely. Can we give you a credit? Absolutely.
Mm.
Don't just go do it. And the
Yeah.
other example you're seeing here is the Welcome to My Nightmare piece by this comedian who's not
Yeah.
funny at all.
Which
He's made a
particularly.
career.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's made a career out of ripping other things off. He's got a
Yes.
photographer that works for him that'll take any album cover and put you in it,
Mm.
and so, I mean, it's like, it's gone crazy because we have no rights. As creators, you have no rights. They took my lettering, they took my concept
Mm.
of Alice, and they put this jack-off space in it, and say it's okay because it's a tribute. Well, that's not fair. It's not right.
No, it's not.
But artists, like I said, artists don't have a whole lot of creative control over
Mm.
stuff,
No.
and so let's see, I'm going to shut this. Something, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Stop. I can't even shut it. Anyway, we have the images. The last thing that we'll talk about is the piece that I had up before this piece, and that was with the King Clone logo and Caliborn Dreams and Penzar and Granddaddy Perp and Burton Cummings poetry book. You had asked me, what are some of the latest things that you're working on? And my whole thing, just like as it went from records to corporate, it's gone from corporate to the medical marijuana and CBD industry.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
those are the two fastest growing industries in the country
They
right
certainly
now.
are, yeah.
And I started about 12 years ago with, okay, hold on, I have to stop for 1 second, I'll bring it back up. I stopped, I started doing, about 12 years ago, I started doing work in the marijuana industry.
Mm.
The next is who had a product that came to me and said, we need a logo for our product. Actually, they called me on the phone and said, we have a product that we need branding for, and we want you to do it. And I said, well, I don't really do logos. And they said, what do you mean? You do logos. We see the stuff that you've done. And I said, well, I said, let me ask you a question. Do you have any kids? And the guy on the other end of the line goes, yeah, I have a boy and a girl. And I said, well, how would you like it if I came and took one of your kids and raised it the way I wanted to raise it, and you had nothing to say about it? And he said, are you kidding? I said, no, I'm serious. How would you feel if I came and got your kid and raised it, you could, on the outside looking in, and you wouldn't have any input at all as to what I did to you? How would you like it? And he said, I wouldn't like it. And I said, well, I don't have any children. What I create are my children.
That's right.
And the last thing I want to do is create something for you and have you go to somebody else and have them mess it all up. So I'm not.
No.
Yeah, but if you're interested in building a brand, come and see me. So they were in Northern California. They arranged a meeting a week later. They came to the house. One guy was in a wheelchair, so we carried him up the steps up to the store complex, and he had this friend with him. And it turned out that it was a marijuana strain. And they didn't want to tell me it was marijuana because they
thought you might freak out.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to do it at all. So
No.
So they show up, and just a quick back up a second. I had some really bad problems with car accidents that I had early on in the 20s and 30s in my hips. And so I had a lot of pain that would wake me up at night. And I had a friend tell me, hey, there's this strain of marijuana called Granddaddy Perp. It's purple, and it helps with pain. It's amazing. It's like a miracle. And so I reluctantly joined. I went to a green doctor, got my card, and joined the collective. And, because I'm the generation where you don't tell anybody you're high.
No.
And so I joined the collective, and I started buying what they call Granddaddy Perp, which was a purple strain of pot. But it wasn't any better than the pot that I was getting from my drug dealer.
No.
So I kind of lost faith in it. I looked for about a year. I spent about $3,000 trying to find it. Every place I went to had it, but it was never really any better than what I had.
No.
So these two guys show up, and we're talking. And they said, yeah, we've got this strain of marijuana called Granddaddy Perk. I said, you're kidding. I got Granddaddy Perk right here. So I go into my little stash thing and I bring out my Granddaddy Perk, and they looked at it and they just laughed. And he told his partner, he said, show him. So he goes into his backpack and he brings out this pot in a glass jar, opens it up, and the whole room fills with incredible odor. It's purple. And the difference between what they had and what they were doing and everybody else is there's a way that you can trick the marijuana plant into turning purple. It's either through cold or heat. It'll turn purple, and then they cut it right then and harvest it. It stays purple. But on the inside, it's green. If you break the bud open, it's green. So, but their bud was completely purple.
Wow.
So all the way through. So that was, they showed me this while, and so all right, these guys were my best friends.
Oh yeah.
So I got a chance to work with them. I created all the Granddaddy Perk branding, and then we did an offshoot called King Clone, because one of the things that the guy that was the geneticist, who's my partner now in King Clone, wanted to create clones for baby plants. And so he's the number one. We're the number one clone company in Northern California, and that's the King Clone logo you see there. The Granddaddy Perk bud is what it really looks like, that purple. Then our science.
A thing of beauty.
Oh yeah, isn't it? I know. It is. Yeah. I've gone to the grow rooms. We are partners. King Clone is partners with CA Collective, which is a Northern California collective in San Jose. It's the second largest in San Jose, and they grow about 30 pounds every 10 days. Wow. And I'll go into these grow rooms that are like half a football field, and it's all these buds. I mean, it's incredible. Am I in heaven? I gotta pinch myself, Just leave me, give me some cigarette papers and some matches, and come back in a month, I'll smoke my way from one end to the other, but so it's a great industry to be involved in. And King Clone is really all about the medical end of it. It's not so much recreational, it's the medical, because my partner Ben is very much into that. He's a geneticist. He's created the strain that is fantastic to taste. It's absolutely fantastic. I even make edibles out of it. I'll do a double boiler, and I'll make extraction into butter, and I'll make muffins and stuff. And they're incredible. I mean, it's a pain.
I'll have to get you in contact with a friend of ours, a local lad, and he does similar work around here with the 420 Club. And so, I mean, if you two get together, you'll talk for decades.
Good. Well, it's funny because it was such a taboo thing for so many years, and there is definitely medical properties.
Absolutely.
Just like hemp. Hemp is the same way. They make fabric. They do all these things with hemp. Anything that could be made out of plastic could be made out of hemp.
Yeah,
it's biodegradable. It's all these things. And yet, CBD, and that's one of the other things that I got involved with. Is you see, there's a logo there from Caliborn Dreams. There's the drinks that we just did. This is probably some of the nicest packaging I've ever done, and it's going through the roof. You can't make it fast enough. People are buying it like crazy.
I'm not surprised.
And it has the regular CBD, and then they have a thing called Delta 9, which has got more THC in it than the 0.0% in the CBD. So those are selling like crazy. And then we did gummies and stuff, and what you see down there in the bottom left is a label from the gummies jars. And there's 6 or 7 of those. And again, all the stuff that I have learned in arts and crafts carried me through to doing the work at Nestle for 30 years, learning about food and what people will respond to and what they want. The work and craft, the 2 largest food companies in the world. And I brought that over into the marijuana world. Where this gummies, I mean, people will look at those drinks or look at those gummies and say, I don't know what this is, but I take it just because it looks delicious. And it
Absolutely, And once they try it, then they'll realise how marvellous it is.
Yeah, it really is. There are really great things to come from both of them. And then the last thing you see here on the right is Burton Cummings, lead singer of the Guess Who. He's a very good friend of mine, and I've done 7 or 8 albums for him. And this poetry book. He's an incredible poet. And so we did a poetry book about 3 years ago. And then the pandemic hit and stuff. We sold out of those. And now we're working on volume 2. It's ready to go to the printer next week. So it's going
Fantastic.
to reprint volume 1 and volume 2. So these are things that I'm working on currently.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, Carrie Ann, it's really great to be able to say no. You know, and people come in and out of our lives, our whole life. And when I look back at Civic Idea, you know, even though I haven't communicated, I've probably the only one was with Drew Struzan over the years, but Carl passed away, Joe Garnett passed away. All these people, I haven't thought about them in years, but I don't think I'll ever forget them. I'll never forget them and the stuff that we created. And when they left, it was like a real blow because I had let my other muscle relax while I was busy getting to work, and then now I had to depend on myself. And I never realized how strong I truly was until it was my only option.
Absolutely.
You know, and I look back over my career and stuff that we've talked about, it's been that way. I've gotten to the point where the only option I have is to depend on what I can bring to it. And each time I've done it, thank God, I'm totally blessed that I'm able to come up with what's needed. You know, I just did it for a big show that's going on at the Troubadour in about a week and a half. It's going to be an incredible event. It's called, I just finished it too. It's called, it's a girl who's May Pang, who was John Lennon's lover. They had broken off with Yoko Ono, and he came out to California with this lady, May Pang. And she, a relationship with them, and she had met all these people. And she's putting on, with a girl named Jackie, putting on a big event at the Troubadour. And it's called, wait a second, and it's so funny because I've just reached a mental block of what that's called. And let's see, it's right here. Oh God, I can't believe it.
Don't worry, I'll look it up. Or send me an email with it on, and
I'll send you.
We'll check it out.
The poster. We just
Please
finished it with 3 days. It's called The Lost Weekend, and it's May Tang and this girl Jackie who's putting it on. And it's called a once in a lifetime opportunity to relive history. So they're getting all these major bands that started in the Troubadour. I don't know how much you know about the Troubadour.
I know some of it, yeah.
It was the place where all the acts got exposed to the record company. So if you were an act and you wanted to get a record deal, you would try and get a date at the Troubadour and be exposed, and all the record company executives would come and sign you. And Doug Wesson, who had the Troubadour, was a very smart guy. He would break acts there. But one of the part of the contract that he would sign with them to have them to debut there was that they would come back every year, once a year for 10 years, and be paid the same amount that they were paid originally. And he had people like Elton John and James Taylor.
Wow.
I mean, the guy was really, really smart with the way he did.
Very.
So, you know, that was quite a thing. But yeah, you just put that on. I'll email you the program.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I'll put that on as well.
And you know, I mean, it's that's pretty much it. You know.
Yeah, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, and it really has.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity, and
I appreciate you telling me.
Anytime you need to talk about anything else, or if we need to redo something, let me know. And if you want to talk about other stuff, I'm always available.
That's lovely of you. Thank you.
Okay, and like I said, if you need anything, just let me know.
Thank you ever so much, Ernie. You take care of yourself.
Any other questions that you had?
No, thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, you take care.
Bye-bye.
Someday.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you're in the UK. Yeah.
Okay, take care.
And you, Ernie. Thank you. Bye. Wow.
Thank you for watching this documentary from ROX Network. If you've enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing, liking and leaving comments. This helps the algorithms on YouTube and helps us, our audience, grow so we can provide yet more interesting documentaries for everyone to enjoy. Check out our website at www.roxnetwork.co.uk. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And don't forget to check out ROX Radio. There is something for everybody on ROX Radio, from classic rock to modern independent metal.